the higher prices having a major impact on younger Americans. In a recent survey by personal finance website Bankrate, more than 70% of Gen Zers and millennials are saving less because the prices are so high. Over 20% of those in the same age group, who are now up to 42 years old, say they will have delayed buying a home, especially because interest rates have gone up. And nearly a third of Gen Z and millennials say they have no emergency savings. For someone who I know has some emergency savings, Thomas Hayes, founder, chairman, managing member of Great Hill Capital, a long-short equity manager in New York City. I don't know, maybe you don't have any savings because you live in New York City, but what's your reaction to this latest inflation data? It seems that there's some people are painting a more positive picture on it.
Well, there's no question, Phil, and thanks for having me. The biggest news from this report was that shelter rose just 0.4% compared to 0.6% last month and 0.8% the month before. What we're seeing even year on year is down for shelter, and year on year is down modestly for rent. The reason that's so important is once that peaks, it starts to really roll over aggressively, and I think we're going to see that in coming months. And the reason there's been such a long delay on shelter and owner's equivalent rent is because leases run about 12 months, and they're now anniversarying on the high rent levels that were over 12 months ago. So we're going to see that come down. But the other thing to note, Phil, which most people don't recognize, is 40% of the CPI components right now, as of today, are in deflation, not inflation. So Karina pointed to energy and food is moving in the right direction. New cars are moving in the right direction. But that owner's equivalent rent is really going to start to kick in for the May, June, and July numbers. And I think this headline number is going to continue to come down, which will be very good for the demographic you referenced.
And then what happens to, I guess, the economy in that situation? I mean, I remember a time when we actually wanted inflation. Now we're asking for, obviously, prices to come back down, but this might impact how perhaps the Fed and the markets may look at consumer spending power.
Well, you've got it exactly. As a matter of fact, the Dow was down over 300 points today and actually reversed after about 2 o'clock. The reason it reversed is Nick Timiraos of the Wall Street Journal, he's known as the Fed Whisperer, kind of the mouthpiece for the Fed, put out an article that said a summer break on hikes appears likely as officials are monitoring banking stress. So they got this CPI number today, and then all of a sudden we get an article at 2 o'clock and things turn around. If the Fed is in fact on pause, that's going to alleviate some of the stress on the banks because they won't have the funding cost pressures trying to compete with treasuries, and that will enable them to get back to lending. Right now, there's a big fear in the market that credit extension is going to continue to contract, and that would slow the economy dramatically. If the Fed is in fact done and that pause is real, as spoken by Nick Timiraos today at 2 o'clock, then we can point to better things to come, and the soft landing remains on the table, which will be good for inflation, it will be good for the economy, and it will keep jobs relatively strong.
You know what I'm surprised about is, we just reported on how a whole generation, maybe 2 generations of young adults have little to no savings, right? And you're talking about these prices that keep going up, yet the savings rate remains low, yet the spending still remains relatively at an elevated level. And I'm wondering, if rates, even if they were to stay exactly here, they still have credit cards, they still have car bills, they still have to buy things, and they're going to want to finance things. How are they going to handle a higher interest rate environment with less consumer spending power?
Yeah, well, excess savings is certainly dwindling. There was a report by the San Francisco Fed out 2 days ago that shows it's down to $500 billion. And that's the bad news, it's coming down. The good news is it's still high. But what it's causing people to do is actually go back to work. One thing we saw in the jobs report, which was a blowout jobs report, very positive on Friday, was the labor force participation rate was at 62.5%. And as that excess savings gets spent down, more people are going to go back into the workforce. That's going to cause the economy to grow faster. It's going to put a cap on wage increases, which is going to put a cap on inflation and allow us to grow conservatively and keep the economy in the soft landing mode. So, and keep the Fed at bay, because the Fed has really been aggressive in the last 12 months. So I think all of these things point to better things to come. you know, the issue of not having emergency savings, that we've read those articles for many, many years. You know, I think as we get through this soft patch, there are brighter skies ahead. And we're seeing it, by the way, in earnings, which came in for Q1 much better than expected. Negative 2% and change relative to negative 6% and change as of March 31st. So one thing that's changed in the dynamic is actually forward estimates in the last couple of weeks have started going up again, not down. And if we look at 2024 at about $245 on the S&P 500, that's not priced in right now with all the positioning and all the negativity in the market. This market wants to continue to climb the wall of worry. We were afraid about jobs. Jobs was better than expected. We were afraid of the Fed. Fed might be on pause. We were afraid of inflation, came in better than expected. Now we're afraid of the debt ceiling. So we'll have to deal with that for the next couple of weeks until they push that down the road.
We didn't even get a chance to talk about the banks. We'll have to save that for another time. Thomas Hayes, thank you very much. Save a little, but don't save too much. Keep spending. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.